Hi, this is Jim Ward of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to Travel Tips Gettysburg. Today we will discuss the background and the history of the battle in the Civil War that took place in July 1863, and we'll also take a little tour on the battlefield so you can kind of get a grasp for where these important events took place. So let's start with the commanding generals of both armies. On the left there, you have General George Meade of the Army of the Potomac. Originally, he was the 5th Corps commander in the Army of the Potomac, who was appointed the commander of the whole army on June 28, 1863, just 3 days prior to Gettysburg. And Robert E. Lee on the right there, he was originally an advisor to President Jefferson Davis, and after Joseph E. Johnston's wounding in June of 1862, he then became he was appointed the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. So Lee went on the offensive that whole summer. There was the 7 Days battles. He had a very big victory at Second Manassas, and this gave him the confidence and the momentum to decide to invade the North. This was the first time he was invading the North. He wanted to win on Northern soil, which would hopefully force Lincoln to sue for peace. The two armies met at Antietam, in Sharpsburg, Maryland. The Confederates usually called the battles by the cities or towns that they took place in, and the Union side used to call them after creeks, rivers, bodies of water. And so at Antietam, it was a 12-hour-long battle. There were 23,000 casualties out of 100,000 engaged. And even though it was technically a tactical draw, the Confederates retreated back across the Potomac into Virginia, and this gave President Lincoln the political and military leverage to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And then Lee had major victories at Fredericksburg in December 1862. In this battle, the Confederates were behind a stone wall with waves and waves of Union soldiers attacking, and the Union soldiers were just mowed down, and the Confederates had the protection of the stone wall there. Chancellorsville, there was another battle in Chancellorsville, Virginia, in May of 1863, just 2 months prior to Gettysburg. The Confederates ended up flanking the Union soldiers and sent them retreating, and it was definitely another major morale booster for the Army of Northern Virginia, because this then gave Lee the impetus to want to invade the North again. So why did Robert E. Lee want to invade the North again? Let's see. He was worried he couldn't fight off a third attack from Union forces in Virginia. To have stayed at Fredericksburg would have allowed the enemy to gather more troops and begin a new campaign. There was also a tenuous supply line. He wanted to live off the enemy's country with their livestock and grains, as well as military supplies. And he wanted Virginia farmers to be allowed to harvest their crops free of enemy interference. He also wanted to redeem himself from the first failed attempt invading the North. What happened during the march north was that in September of 1862 was that a Union soldier found a cigar wrapped with a piece of paper around it, and this was actually Lee's order number 191, indicating where the Confederates were going to be going. And so his plan was kind of, lost there, because the Union knew where he was going to be going. He wanted a battle of his own choosing when he had good defensive ground, and wanted to force the Union to attack. And he wanted to add fuel to the growing peace movement in the North to force Lincoln to negotiate for peace. So this is the Day 1 fighting battle map, if you want to take a look at some of the areas there. So the first day's fighting took place north and west of town. So you can see the blue is the Union, the red is the Confederates, and if you look where it says AP Hill, it crosses over a road there. That's called the Chambersburg Pike. That's where the Confederates were marching in, and we'll go into a little bit about the Day 1 fighting in a little bit. But this just to give you an idea of where the fighting was on that first day. Okay, so Major General George Meade ordered his 94,000-man Army of the Potomac to pursue Lee's army. The Confederates were strung out in an arc from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania to the outskirts of Harrisburg to concentrate at Hashtown. On June 30th, Major General Henry Heath ventured into Gettysburg when they encountered what they thought were local militia, but it was in fact Union cavalry. Despite orders from Lee to avoid a general engagement until the army was concentrated, Heath ordered 2 of his brigades to undertake reconnaissance on July 1st when it ran headlong into 2 brigades of Union cavalry under Brigadier General John Buford, who had taken up a defensive position west of town. The first shot of the battle was fired by Marcellus Jones of the 8th Illinois Cavalry at 7:30 a.m. on July 1st. Confederate General James Archer's men were pushing the Union cavalry back to McPherson's Ridge. John Reynolds, on the right there, he was the left-wing commander of the Army of the Potomac. He was in charge of men that were part of the Iron Brigade. These were regiments from Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana, and he was driving them into the McPherson's woods to push back the Confederates. And as he was doing this, he was shot in the back of the head and fell dead from his horse. He was the highest-ranking general to be killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. Okay, and then we come to Winfield Scott Hancock. Hancock was in charge of the 2nd Corps at the Battle of Gettysburg, and he kind of assumed the leadership role after Reynolds' death, and he gathered the retreating soldiers into defensive positions on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge. And this is where the monument to John Reynolds is, just east of the McPherson's Woods. That is the approximate location where they say that he was shot and fell from his horse. And then this is just a little close-up of that, so you can get a look at what the monument looks like. And the picture on the right there, if you look to the right of the barn, there's actually a road that's coming in. That's the Chambersburg Pike, so that's where the Confederates were coming through, marching down that road into Gettysburg. John Burns, one of my favorite characters from the Battle of Gettysburg. He was just shy of 70 years old. He was a veteran of the War of 1812 and a former town constable of Gettysburg. On July 1st, 1863, he approached an officer of the 150th Pennsylvania and fought alongside the Iron Brigade until he was wounded 3 times and was captured. He was released soon after. He was made an honorary member of the Iron Brigade and even met President Lincoln, who sought Burns out when he came to the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery. And there's a monument, or a statue rather, to John Burns on the Gettysburg battlefield, not too far from John Reynolds' monument. So let's talk about the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. This is located on Oak Hill. This is where Major General Robert E. Rhodes's division attacked Union soldiers on McPherson's and Oak Ridge. The memorial was dedicated by President Franklin Roosevelt on July 3rd, 1938, which was the 75th anniversary of the battle. 1 Union and 1 Confederate veteran unveiled the 47.5-foot tall shaft. Roosevelt compared the task of the men of the 1860s with the men of his day. Quote, all of them we honor, not asking under which flag they fought then, thankful that they stand together under one flag now, end quote. In less than 5 years, the sons and grandsons of these veterans would be standing together in unimaginable, terrible battles against enemies of the world. All right, so now let's turn to the 11th Pennsylvania and Sallie the dog. Sallie the War Dog, as she was known, was the mascot of the 11th Pennsylvania. She was given to the regiment as a puppy and took part in all their battles, taking position at the end of the firing line, and it was reported that she barked furiously at rebels. She was separated from the regiment at Gettysburg on July 1st during the retreat through town. After the battle, the men returned to the scene of the first day's fighting and found Sallie, weak but alive, and maintaining a vigil over the dead and dying of her men from the 11th Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, Sallie was killed at the Battle of Hatcher's Run in February of 1865, and in spite of heavy Confederate fire, several men stopped to bury her. When the monument was designed, the regiment's survivors unanimously decided to include a tribute to their smallest comrade. She is one of 2 dogs depicted on monuments at Gettysburg. The other is on the Irish Brigade monument, and Sallie is the only one representing a dog who was in the battle. And this is the North Carolina Memorial. One out of every 4 casualties at Gettysburg for the Confederates hailed from the Tar Heel State. From this spot, you can see the terrain and the distance the Confederates had to deal with, and it stands as a tribute to the bravery and heroism of North Carolina soldiers. The statue depicts a wounded officer pointing the way forward to the enemy while a veteran and a younger comrade lead a color bearer in the charge. The sculptor of this memorial is Gutzon Borglum, and he is the same person who did the president's faces on Mount Rushmore. So now we're going to go to day 2. So what happened on the first day was Confederate reinforcements overwhelmed the Union soldiers, and so where you see McPherson Ridge on this map, they were pushed back through the town, which is in the center, and down to where now it says Howard, Slocum, Newton, and Hancock. That's the far right of that line is Culp's Hill, and then you have Howard, which is Cemetery Hill, and then Newton and Hancock were located on Cemetery Ridge. So let's talk about Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles was a former congressman. He was a former Tammany Hall politician. He before the war, he had shot and killed his wife's lover in Lafayette Park, just across from the White House. The person that he shot and killed was Philip B. Key, who was the son of the writer of the Star-Spangled Banner, Francis Scott Key. He pleaded insanity, which was one of the first uses of that plea, and he actually got off. Then, being he was in the Union Army, and not because of any military or pretty much because of no military experience, and more because of his political connections, he was given a Corps commander's appointment, and so he was in charge of the 3rd Corps at Gettysburg. And I'll show you a map in a little bit, but he had ordered his 3rd Corps far out ahead of the Union line, which created a gap. He posted them at Devil's Den, the Peach Orchard, and the Wheat Field, and the result of this was that the 3rd Corps was overrun and driven from the field. Despite this fiasco, Sickles was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions at Gettysburg. The citation states that he, quote, displayed most conspicuous gallantry on the field, vigorously contesting the advance of the enemy and continuing to encourage his troops after being himself severely wounded. William Barksdale's and William Wolford's brigades attacked the Peach Orchard along the Millerstown Road, causing Union troops to retreat. Sickles had his right leg all but torn off and later had it amputated. He was carried off, and it was said that he was coolly smoking a cigar. And just to give you an idea of what was going on with Dan Sickles' men, so you can see it's like a V shape there, the Peach Orchard, Devil's Den, and you can see where the wheat field is. So Sickles was supposed to be where you see Little Round Top and Round Top, and he pushed them out so far ahead of the Union line. You can see the gap that was created, and he created what's called a salient. And in military terms, this is a very vulnerable position because you're exposed on 2 sides in that V shape, rather than having like a center, a left, and a right flank. And so they were overrun on the field, and they started retreating back towards Cemetery Ridge, and this created a situation that we'll talk about in a little bit with the 1st Minnesota. This is Captain John Bigelow. He was in charge of the 9th Massachusetts Battery, and on the right side he had Brigadier General Andrew Humphrey's soldiers retreating along with his as the Confederates were coming in on them. After 6 p.m., the only Union force was a lone Union artillery battery of 6 bronze Napoleons. John Bigelow fought to hold the ground. A former Harvard graduate, he completed retreat by firing and recoiling. The ammunition was brought to the front of the gun so they could be fired rapidly. He was also twice shot during this engagement, but he bought Lieutenant Colonel Freeman McGilvery 30 minutes to place more guns on an empty space on Cemetery Ridge. This is the State of Mississippi Monument. The monument stands where General Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade began their charge into the peach orchard on July 2nd, and represents the desperate hand-to-hand fighting of that day. The color bearer has fallen mortally wounded, and his comrade steps over his body using his club musket to defend the fallen flag. So the peach orchard was the center of Dan Sickles' line. Artillerist Henry Wentz placed Confederate artillery facing his boyhood home that stood on top of this ridge. Note the monument dedicated to the Excelsior Brigade there on the left. This was the brigade that Sickles commanded before becoming a corps commander. In the small between the columns there, a bust of Dan Sickles was supposed to be placed, but the money went missing for it. Some believe he took the funds. So Sickles has no monument on the Gettysburg battlefield, although he did put through Congress the 1895 bill that made Gettysburg a national military park. When asked why he doesn't have a monument on the battlefield, he replied, "The whole damn battlefield is my monument." And this is the Trossel Farm. This is actually this was Dan Sickles' headquarters. This is where he was hit in the leg and severely wounded. And this is where John Bigelow retreated to and fought to hold the ground on July 2nd, 1863. And to the left of that barn is a diamond-shaped marker which indicates where the location of where Dan Sickles was injured. And also, if you notice the hole there in the top of the barn, in top of the barn, you can see that's a Confederate shot that went through, and the hole is still there. It's amazing. So this is Cemetery Ridge, a patchwork of infantry and batteries placed by Hancock on Cemetery Ridge were intended to close the gap left by Sickles. When Hancock came to the area and realized that there was no one covering where Dan Sickles had left from, he rode up to the 1st Minnesota's Colonel William Colville and said, "Do you see those colors? Take them." So the 1st Minnesota went charging into Alabamians who were coming towards Cemetery Ridge, and the regiment actually lost 85% of its soldiers, with 215 killed and wounded in the charge. But they kept the Confederates back and gave enough time for more reinforcements to be placed on Cemetery Ridge. And this is the 1st Minnesota Regiment monument. It's a very popular, well-known one on the battlefield, and I highly recommend you check it out. It's very well made. Okay, and this is the Pennsylvania State Memorial. 34,500 men who fought at Gettysburg were from Pennsylvania. Bronze plaques are all around the monument that list every name of every Pennsylvanian who fought here at Gettysburg. Now we turn to Reverend Father William Corby. He was a Holy Cross chaplain of the 88th New York Regiment of the famed Irish Brigade, which were men from New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. The Irish Brigade was asked to bolster Sickles' Third Corps men who had gone too far out ahead of the Union line. So before the men went into the fight, Father William Corby, he asked the brigade commander, Colonel Patrick Kelly, if he could say a few words. Men removed their hats and knelt down. He stood on top of a boulder, raised his right hand, and asked God to grant them courage, and said, quote, "Remember, men, the Catholic Church refuses a Christian burial to the soldier who turns his back upon the foe." After the Civil War, William Corby served 2 terms as president of University of Notre Dame, and there's actually an exact duplicate of this statue there, and they call it Fair Catch Corby. And this is the wheat field. This is one of the bloodiest and toughest fights in the American Civil War. 4,000 American men were killed, wounded, or captured in this area. Portions of the field changed hands 6 times. There was lots of hand-to-hand combat. Colonel Edward E. Cross of Hancock's 2nd Corps was wounded 12 times. It was said you could walk in parts of the field and never touch the ground. The wheat was blood red, and you might have to wait several days before medical attention. It was literally no man's land. And these are just a couple of the monuments you might see on the battlefield in that area, particularly the Irish Brigade monument. You can see that's the second of the monuments that features a dog on the monument, besides Sallie and the 11th Pennsylvania. And this is Pitzer's Woods. That's me and my friend Dan with General Longstreet. The 1st United States sharpshooters scouted the woods towards midday on July 2nd and engaged Alabama troops that were gathering there for Longstreet's attack. Later in the afternoon, Confederate General William Barksdale's brigade waited in reserve here before its attack toward the Sherpy House and the Peach Orchard. This is the State of Alabama Monument. The monument was designed and sculpted by Joseph W. Erner of Maryland. It represents the spirit of Alabama pointing the way forward while a wounded soldier passes a cartridge box to his comrade, representing the determination to continue the struggle. The monument stands where General Evander Law's Alabama Brigade began their assault toward Little Round Top on July 2nd after a grueling 18-mile approach march. Alabama sent almost 6,000 men to Gettysburg with the Army of Northern Virginia. Most of them were in Law's Brigade in the 1st Corps, O'Neill's Brigade in the 2nd Corps, and Wilcox's Brigade in the 3rd Corps. Alabama lost 2,249 casualties at Gettysburg. So now we come to Little Round Top. Just to give you an idea, so the picture on the right is looking at the summit from the bottom. That's the western slope of Little Round Top. And on the left there is from the summit of Little Round Top, and it's looking down towards Devil's Den, which is an area with a string of large boulders where a lot of the fighting on July 2nd happened. So this is General Gouverneur K. Warren. He was sent by General George Meade to see who Sickles left to guard the Round Tops after he moved out far ahead of the line. Warren realized that Little Round Top was completely unoccupied except for some signalmen. He sent 2 riders pounding off for reinforcements, one of which came across Brigadier General Strong Vincent, who he actually bypassed protocol and sent his brigade to Little Round Top. By doing this, instead of allowing the messenger to go to his superior like it was supposed to, Vincent actually made himself susceptible to a possible court-martial. So in any event, he sent his brigade up to Little Round Top, and part of that 5th Corps was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's 20th Maine. And this is the General Warren Monument on the summit of the western slope of Little Round Top. And just another look of it at sunset. So now we turn to Strong Vincent and Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. So Chamberlain, his 20th Maine were ordered to hold their ground at all hazards. And this meant you cannot and will not retreat. You have to hold your ground. And Chamberlain and his 20th Maine men, he was holding the absolute left flank of the Union line on July 2nd, 1863. And he was facing the 15th Alabama, led by Colonel William C. Oates. So the Confederates in the 15th Alabama charged 5 times along the southern slope, and 5 times they were repulsed. The fighting was literally hand-to-hand at times, and the 2 wings of the regiment of the 20th Maine had their backs almost to each other because that's how much they were being pressured and pushed back. Ammunition ran low, and so Chamberlain ordered his men to fix bayonets, and he had them charge down the hill, and this actually pushed the Confederates off of Little Round Top and back up to Big Round Top just south of it, and saved the Union line, the left side of the line, at least that day on July 2nd, 1863. Strong Vincent, he was actually killed trying to rally men to fill space that was left open when 1/3 of the 16th Michigan began retreating. So these are some notes that people leave to the, at the monument for the 20th Maine, one of which says, 20th Maine, wow and thank you from a Georgia rebel. Your sacrifice and valor are legendary and admirable, the ultimate Americans. So and you'll see flags there, people put coins there. It's just really nice that people still remember the 20th Maine after all this time. And this is what the 20th Maine Monument looks like on the left there. On the right is the left flank marker for the 20th Maine on July 2nd. You'll see these throughout the battlefield. They mark where different regiments were located so that you can see this was the left of their line. They have one for the right of the line. And actually on July 2nd, the 20th Maine had to do something called refusing their line, which rather than being more of a straight line, they had to actually fold it, or bend it rather, to a 90-degree angle because the Confederates were trying to come around their flank and attack. So on July 2nd, when Chamberlain ordered the bayonet charge, this left part that was at the right angle came around, and then as soon as it came in line with the rest of the 20th Maine, they stormed down the hill. And just another picture from the western slope at the summit of Little Round Top. And again, a little more of a close-up picture so you can see what it looks like. So this is the 140th New York Monument. They were led by Patrick O'Rourke, who's featured on the monument there. He was actually mortally wounded during the fighting. The 140th New York had just arrived in time to fill the gap left by the 16th Michigan, and the right flank was secure because of this. And just a little note for when you visit, they say that if you rub Colonel Patrick O'Rourke's nose that's on the monument, it brings good luck. So as a result of all the fighting on Little Round Top, Vincent's brigade lost 485 men, or just over 27% of those engaged. And this is Devil's Den, just to give you an idea of what I was talking about before with the string of boulders. This is where men from Dan Sickles' corps were placed, and where a lot of heavy fighting occurred on July 2nd. So now we come to Culp's Hill. 4,700 Confederates on Culp's Hill. Now this is the right of the Union line. The Union line at this point had become what kind of looked like a fish hook. So the barb of the fish hook is where Culp's Hill was located on the right of the line. And 4,700 Confederates attacked 1,400 Union soldiers under the command of Brigadier General George Sears Greene at 7 p.m. on July 2nd. The Union soldiers were strongly entrenched and protected behind Greene's breastworks on the hill. There was friendly fire between the 1st North Carolina and 1st Maryland. The 71st New York, sent by Hancock, retreated because Richard P. Smith would not have his men murdered. The Confederates found an empty breastwork which they tried to exploit. The men of the 137th New York were able to hold back the Confederates, but they had won a foothold in that unoccupied Union works. Not one member of the 12th Corps up on Culp's Hill received the Medal of Honor. They did not receive official credit in Meade's report to the War Department. And this is General George Sears Greene. I believe he was the oldest general at Gettysburg, if I'm remembering correctly. So just to give you an idea of the intensity of the battle up on Culp's Hill, there were 81 bullet holes through the flag of the 149th New York Regiment. And it really shows the intensity of the battle. The staff had been struck 7 times, and while the Union soldiers were outnumbered 3-1, they inflicted 6 times more casualties. Okay, and this is the first Long Island Volunteers Monument. They were recruited at the recruiting office on Fulton Street in Lower Manhattan. Men from Rochester and Brooklyn, Long Island areas were mustered in for 3 years on June 24, 1861, totaling 901 men. Trained at Fort Schuyler, they were formally designated as the 67th New York on September 19, 1861. They were known as the Brooklyn Phalanx, commanded by Colonel Julius Adams and Lieutenant Colonel Nelson Cross. They were involved in many major engagements from Fredericksburg to Chancellorsville, Gettysburg to the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, and they were at Appomattox when Lee surrendered to Grant. At Gettysburg, they took part in fighting on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge during Pickett's charge. Sorry about that. Another Confederate attack at 10 a.m. on Culp's Hills was the same as before. There were frontal assaults against well-dug-in or well-secured positions. The Federals kept up the rotation of fresh troops. At Pardee Field, where the Union troops had won possession of a stone wall, the 1st Maryland Battalion of Stewart's Confederate Brigade faced the 1st Maryland Eastern Shore Infantry of Brigadier General Henry H. Lockwood's Union Brigade. Both had friends and relatives on the other side, and they were gathering up many wounded and killed who were friends, acquaintances, relatives. But by 11 a.m., the Confederates began pulling back, and Culp's Hill held. Now we can talk about East Cavalry Field. So there was a cavalry engagement at Crest Ridge, which is now known as East Cavalry Field. Major General Jeb Stuart attacked what is now called East Cavalry Field, 3 miles southeast of Gettysburg. Union cavalry repelled Stuart's forces. Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer personally led attacks, yelling, "Come on, you Wolverines!" There were reckless charges with both sides crashing into each other. Horses were turned over, close-in fights with guns and sabers, and then finally the Confederates broke off. Cavalry Division Leader David Gregg mentioned that if Stuart was able to get to the rear of Union forces, the consequences would have been disastrous. And this is the monument to the Michigan Cavalry Brigade on East Cavalry Field. So definitely something you should check out if you're going to Gettysburg. They have a brochure with a full map of the battlefield that will easily show you where to go for that. Okay, so this is General James Longstreet. He was the 1st Corps commander for the Confederates in the Army of Northern Virginia. He was Lee's senior lieutenant and advisor. He actually wanted to swing around the Union left and make a stand between Meade's army and Washington so that the Union would attack the Confederates. But General Lee responded, "No, I am going to whip them here, or they are going to whip me." This is General George E. Pickett. He was described as dashing and perfumed. He had been at Chancellorsville and wounded at Gaines' Mill. He was Longstreet's protege, and this would be the first time he would bring his division into battle. So on July 3rd, 1863, at around 1 p.m., a giant artillery barrage intended to soften up the Union defenses on Cemetery Ridge began. And this lasted until about 2:30, 3 o'clock. The Confederates were overshooting, not hitting the soldiers at the stone wall. During this bombardment, to help bolster his men's courage, General Winfield Scott Hancock rode up and down the Union lines amid the screaming shells. An aide urged him to take cover. Hancock replied, "There are times when a corps commander's life does not count." Union artillery fired back. After the cannonade ceased, 13,000 men emerged from the woods on Seminary Ridge. Their aim was the copse of trees at the center of the Union line. It was reported that the Confederates were forbidden to fire or even give the rebel yell until they were on top of the enemy. The only spot that the Confederates made it across the stone wall on Cemetery Ridge was at the angle, which was a crook in the stone wall. As the Confederates retreated, soldiers from the 20th Massachusetts began taunting them with the chant of "Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg." And this was because now they had the stone wall, just like the Confederates did at Fredericksburg. So the Confederate attack was repulsed by the Union Army, and they headed back towards their lines on Seminary Ridge. So the copse of trees is the picture on the left there. That was the focal point of where the Confederates were intending to attack, because that was near the area where the stone wall was, where the Union soldiers were dug in. On the right there, where the tree is, that's where the angle was, and we'll talk a little more about that as well in a little bit. This is also they call it the high watermark up on Cemetery Ridge, because the high watermark, they call it that because this is where the Confederates had the best chance to win the Civil War. This was the last time they would go on the offensive rather than the defensive. And also the monument there on the, or the marker I should say, on the right, on the left of the screen is where Brigadier General Lewis A. Armistead fell here, fell mortally wounded, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So after the repulse of Pickett's charge, the soldiers retreated back to Seminary Ridge. General Lee met the soldiers as they limped back and proclaimed it was all his fault. He even, when he saw General Pickett, asked Pickett to prepare for a Union counterattack, to which Pickett replied, "General, I have no division now." So let's talk about the friendship between Winfield Scott Hancock and Lewis A. Armistead, who I just mentioned a little before. Lewis A. Armistead was leading a brigade at Gettysburg, and so he was facing his friend Winfield Scott Hancock, who was up on Cemetery Ridge. The two had served together in California, and they were best of friends. And when they had to depart and go to their separate sides, it was obviously a very sad time for them. And they both always feared that they would face each other on the battlefield. So at Gettysburg, Lewis Armistead was leading his brigade, and he and his men made it across that angle at the stone wall and attempted to turn an empty Union cannon on the Union soldiers. When he was shot and fell mortally wounded, Armistead was taken to a federal field hospital where he requested that his watch and other valuables be given to his friend Hancock, who had faced him that day from the Union lines on Cemetery Ridge. Armistead died 2 days later on July 5th and was buried in his family plot in St. Paul's Churchyard in Baltimore. Hancock would also be shot and injured that day, and the two would never be able to see each other again. And just a view of the 72nd Pennsylvania Infantry Monument. Sometimes you get a beautiful sunset when you're up on that area, and it's quite a sight to see. So I just wanted to include that for all of you to see. There actually is a marker indicating where Winfield Scott Hancock was wounded. It's a little bit to the south of the copse of trees, so it's kind of off the beaten path. So you'd have to kind of walk around and search for it. All right, so let's talk about the Virginia Memorial. It's the first Confederate state memorial in the park. Lee positioned himself to watch Pickett's charge here. It is the largest of the Confederate monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield, and it's a fitting tribute for the state that provided the largest contingent to the Army of Northern Virginia. It features Robert E. Lee's figure topping the monument astride his favorite horse, Traveler, and it was created by sculptor Frederick Sievers from photographs and life masks of the general. He even went to Lexington, Virginia to study Traveler's skeleton, which was preserved at Washington and Lee University. The monument stands 41 feet high. The statue of Lee and Traveler stands 14 feet high. The total cost of the monument was $50,000. Virginia contributed over 19,000 men to the Army of Northern Virginia at Gettysburg, the largest contingent from the 12 Confederate states. Almost 4,500 of these, almost 1 out of 4, became casualties, the second highest state total, just below North Carolina. Below Lee, as he studies, actually, you know what, let me go to the next slide so I can show you. Below Lee, as he studies the distant Union lines, are 7 Confederate soldiers. According to the marker at the base of the monument, the group represents various types who left civil occupations to join the Confederate Army. Left to right, there's a professional man, a mechanic, an artist, a boy, a businessman, a farmer, and a youth. Now we move to Alonzo Cushing. He was 22 years old at Gettysburg, appointed to West Point in 1857. He graduated in June of 1861 and was commissioned a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. During the Chancellorsville campaign, he was promoted to command Battery A, 4th United States Artillery in the 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac. At Gettysburg, he commanded 126 men and 6 cannons on Cemetery Ridge. All of Cushing's officers had been killed, and all but 2 of his guns had been silenced. During the Confederate bombardment, he was wounded in the abdomen and the right shoulder. Propped up by Sergeant Frederick Fugger, Cushing fought on regardless of subordinates' pleading. When asked to retire from the field and seek medical treatment, Cushing coolly replied, "No, I stay right here and fight it out, or die in the attempt." Cushing personally directed every shot as his crew struggled to load and prepare the cannon for the next round. Switching to double charges of canister, Cushing could now see the Confederates were barely 100 yards away and would be up to the muzzle of his gun within seconds. Using his own thumb to stop his gun's vent, burning his fingers to the bone, he grasped the lanyard that fired the gun, and he shouted above the din to Sergeant Frederick Fugger, standing nearby, "I will give them one more shot." Seconds later, a Confederate bullet struck him through the mouth, killing him instantly. His lifeless body tumbled over the gun trail. And this is they have the Battery A, 4th U.S. Artillery set up on the battlefield there at Cemetery Ridge, where Cushing and his men were fighting valiantly. Just a little note about Alonzo Cushing. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, I believe in 2014 by President Obama. And so it took him, a little over 150 years, but he finally got the due that should have come his way a long time ago. Okay, so now let's talk about Jenny Wade and her tragic love story. At 7 a.m. on the morning of July 3rd, Confederate sharpshooters began firing through the north windows of Jenny's sister's home. Jenny had been there because her sister had given birth to a baby, and so she was there helping out. At 8 a.m., amidst the pings and ricochets of bullets flying through the house, Jenny stood in the kitchen kneading dough to make bread for the Union soldiers when she was struck in the back by a Confederate bullet that had traveled through a wooden door, killing her instantly. Sadly, Jenny's tragic story does not end there. Jenny was engaged to a Union soldier from Gettysburg named Corporal Johnston Jack Skelly, who, unknown to her, had been mortally wounded 2 weeks earlier in the Battle of Winchester. Private Wesley Culp, a Gettysburg native fighting for the Confederacy, had gone to school with both Skelly and Jenny and came across Skelly at a field hospital where the wounded soldier gave him a note to pass on to his fiancée Jenny. Unfortunately, the note never made it back to Jenny. On the same day she was killed, Culp, still carrying the message, died during fighting near his family farm at Culp's Hill. Skelly finally succumbed to his mortal wounds on July 12th, just 9 days after Jenny and Wesley Culp were killed. Today, Jack Skelly and Jenny Wade lie in rest close to each other in the Evergreen Cemetery in Gettysburg, together again. So let's talk about the creation of the National Cemetery in Gettysburg. Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin visited the battlefield with local citizen and lawyer David Wills on July 10th, just a week after the battle, and was shocked by its condition. He designated Wills as a state agent charged with seeing to the proper burial of Pennsylvania's dead. At a meeting of state agents in Wills's house several days later, the idea of establishing a permanent national cemetery for all Union dead was advanced. Governor Curtin approved and gave Wills the authority to oversee its construction. So this is the David Wills house. It's in the center of town. This is where Abraham Lincoln was invited to stay on the night of November 18th, 1863. Lincoln obviously was in town that day for the next day rather, to deliver his Gettysburg address. He actually completed it in Wills's house the night of November 18th. And so when you can actually visit the room that Abraham Lincoln stayed in that night. You will stand in the room and actually be able to look at the bed. That's the actual bed that Abraham Lincoln slept in on the night of November 18th. So definitely check that out. It's actually run by the National Park Service, and they have a great exhibit in describing things about the history of the Wills family and then what happened when Lincoln came to town. So on November 19th, 1863, as many as 20,000 people converged on Gettysburg to honor the dead and to catch a glimpse of visiting dignitaries. Lincoln had been invited almost as an afterthought to offer, quote, a few appropriate remarks. The keynote speaker was Edward Everett, a celebrated orator of the day and a former president of Harvard. He actually spoke for 2 hours at the dedication, and then Lincoln rose. Lincoln spoke of a new birth of freedom and changed the focus of the war from not just being reuniting the country, but to also abolishing slavery. Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes, and after the ceremony, long after, Edward Everett wrote to Lincoln, "I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes." And these are just some pictures from Soldiers National Cemetery. There's the bust of Abraham Lincoln, known as the Lincoln Address Memorial. That on the right there is the Soldiers National Monument, which was dedicated. And the layout you can see of how the graves are laid out in the cemetery. And you can see that some of them, unfortunately, were not able to be identified. So, for instance, you have a mass grave of 104 bodies from Maine. Other single graves are just numbered 184, 185, 186. So, it's really a solemn visit to that cemetery when you walk through it, knowing, one, how many soldiers are there, and two, that unfortunately many of them couldn't even be identified. So now we come to the Seminary Ridge Museum, also known as the Lutheran Theological Seminary. Union and Confederate soldiers used the cupola to survey the area. It is believed that John Buford was in the cupola when General John Reynolds arrived on the first day of battle. Reynolds reportedly shouted up to Buford, "What goes, John?" Buford replied, "There's the devil to pay." This building was also used as a field hospital. This is the Farnsworth House. If you look on the right there, that picture is of the window to the attic where Confederate sharpshooters were actually stationed. And if you look, you can see all the little white marks along the side of the building. Those are bullet holes from the Battle of Gettysburg. Then there's so many of them on the side of that building. This is the Jenny Wade House. This is where Jenny Wade was shot and killed on the third day of battle. You can see the door where the bullet went through. It's still preserved. It's still there. On the right is the kitchen where she was kneading dough to make bread for the Union soldiers when she was shot and killed by a stray Confederate bullet. This is the Gettysburg diorama. Only at the Gettysburg diorama can you see the entire 6,000-acre battlefield at one time, with over 20,000 hand-painted soldiers, horses, cannons, and buildings. It includes a 30-minute light and sound show of the three-day battle, from the first shot fired to the last moments at the high water mark of the Confederacy. This is Gettysburg Lincoln Railroad Station. Built in 1859 to serve as the western terminus of the Gettysburg Railroad line to Hanover, Pennsylvania, the station served as a field hospital, a departure point for thousands of soldiers, and a place of greeting for President Lincoln when he came to deliver his Gettysburg Address. This is General Lee's headquarters. When General Lee arrived here at Seminary Ridge on July 1st, his army had routed the Union forces, and he immediately established his headquarters here at the Thompson House. 4 guards were placed around the house, and Lee's staff members and officers made their camps nearby. Lee took his meals in the Thompson House and even slept here on July 1st. But due to the intensity of the battles of July 2nd and 3rd, Lee spent little time at his official headquarters, yet the tents of his headquartered staff remained there, and all incoming messages for General Lee were sent to the Thompson House. Okay, so this is the first shot marker. This is part of a few things that are off the beaten path from the battlefield. This is where Lieutenant Marcellus Jones of Company E of the 8th Illinois Cavalry Regiment was picketing the Chambersburg Pike. at this location on July 1st when he saw a strong force of Confederate infantry begin to cross Marsh Creek about a half-mile to the west. A private was about to fire first when Jones stopped him and said, "Give me the honor of opening the ball." This is Sachs Covered Bridge. It was used by both Union and Confederate soldiers. The Confederates used it in their retreat. This is the diamond-shaped marker that I was talking about earlier in the picture that I showed of the Trossel Farm. To the left of that is this diamond-shaped marker that indicates where Dan Sickles was wounded on July 2nd, 1863. So definitely something to check out when you visit the Trossel Farm. This is where Strong Vincent, on the left there, there's an etching in the boulder where it says that where he was standing, when he was shot, mortally wounded. He was a brigade commander at Gettysburg. On the march to Gettysburg, he wrote his wife, "If I fall, remember you have given your husband to the most righteous cause that ever widowed a woman." When the 16th Michigan began to fall back under heavy pressure, Vincent mounted this boulder and shouted, "Don't give an inch," as he brandished a riding crop that had been a gift of his wife. The other monument on the right is a monument dedicated to Vincent in 1878. This is the John Buford Monument. This is a little while down the road east of where the first shot marker is, and so it's a very well done, well made monument. And just next to him is General John Reynolds Monument. So these two are both in the same area, within about 20-30 feet of each other. All right, so let's talk about Barlow's Knoll. At Gettysburg, Francis Barlow's men held the extreme right of the Union line north of town. He had pushed his division far forward, believing the knoll that now bears his name would be valuable ground to anchor his line. But as Jubal Early's 2nd Confederate Corps arrived on the exposed Union flank, the position became untenable. Barlow was shot as he tried to rally his disintegrating line. He dismounted, and 2 men tried to help him to the rear until one of them was also wounded. Barlow, alone now, was struck a second time by a spent ball and could no longer stand. As the Confederates swept forward, the fight raged over him briefly, and his finger and clothing were grazed by bullets. A Confederate staff officer, Lieutenant A.L. Pitzer, and some of his men carried Barlow to what they believed was a safe place in the rear and provided him with water. But Union artillery soon began to shell the area, so Union prisoners helped move him to a house further to the rear. He was told he was not expected to survive. For years, a story was told of how Confederate General John B. Gordon helped take care of the stricken Barlow on the field, then met him years later at a dinner after believing him dead. There was even a diorama in the Cyclorama building at the park illustrating the event. But Barlow never mentioned Gordon, although he wrote of Major Pizzera in a detailed letter to his mother. It is very possible that the tale may have been an embellishment or an outright fabrication that Gordon, a master storyteller, used in his career on the speaker circuit. So this is part of what is now Gettysburg College, but back in 1863 during the battle, this building was called Pennsylvania College. This building served as a hospital for both Union and Confederate wounded. Soldiers with injuries from every type of weapon were in every room. Blood stained the floors and piles of amputated limbs grew. Located on Cemetery Hill, Evergreen Cemetery is where Jenny Wade and John Burns are buried. Oliver Otis Howard and his 11th Corps were also stationed on Cemetery Hill. The 11th Corps had collapsed under Stonewall Jackson's attack at Chancellorsville, and at Gettysburg had already done so under Richard Ewell's attack. Brigadier General Harry Hayes' Louisiana Tigers and Isaac Avery's North Carolina brigades attacked East Cemetery Hill. There was hand-to-hand combat with the oncoming rebels, and Isaac Avery was shot in the neck and knocked off his horse. Knowing his wound was fatal, he wrote a note to his second-in-command that said, "Major, tell my father I died with my face to the enemy." His North Carolinians pressed on but were finally pushed back. Other Union regiments retreated when another gap was created, and there was more hand-to-hand fighting at the guns, but Hancock had sent reinforcements to help out, and the fighting came to a close. And so you can see, so on the left there, that's John Burns's grave with the American flag. Jenny Wade is in the center there. She has an American flag that flies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I believe she's only the second woman ever in the United States to have that honor, which the first one is Betsy Ross. On the right there is the grave to General James Geddes, who was the proprietor of Gettysburg. All right, so we come to the Gettysburg Museum and Visitor Center, and this is where you might want to start out first to get your bearings, with everything that you're going to be planning to do. And they have a great museum there. You can actually go watch a film there, which is narrated by Morgan Freeman, featuring voices of Sam Waterston and Marcia Gay Harden. It's called A New Birth of Freedom, and it places the monumental events of the Battle of Gettysburg into the larger context of American history. After the film, you can visit the Cyclorama. This was a painting that was created by French artist Paul-Philippe Pitot in the late 1880s. He took brush to canvas and created the Battle of Gettysburg cyclorama painting. He spent months on the battlefield researching the Battle of Gettysburg with veterans, a battlefield guide, and a photographer. It took Philippe Pitot and a team of assistants more than a year to complete. The result is a breathtaking oil painting that measures 377 feet in circumference and 42 feet high. Longer than a football field and as tall as a 4-story structure, the Gettysburg cyclorama painting immerses visitors in the fury of Pickett's charge during the Battle of Gettysburg. First, watch the film, and then you can witness the amazing show at the cyclorama for yourself. And this is the cyclorama, just to give you an idea. So it features the third day of fighting, Pickett's charge, and it's very well done. It's very interesting too how they do it. You see little puffs of smoke come where they would be fired out of a cannon. They have land that like a fake landscape that leads into the painting, so it looks like it's one seamless trail or path. It's really well done. And I highly recommend you get to do that when you're in Gettysburg. All right, so now we're at Eisenhower National Historic Site. This served as the weekend retreat and retirement home for President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Shuttle buses depart regularly from the Museum and Visitor Center after you purchase tickets there to go see the home. The tour of the grounds includes the house with nearly all of its original furnishings, gardens, tea house, skeet range, barn, show barn, putting green, and much more. And these are just some ways that you could tour the battlefield. They have a lot of different options now. They have segways, they have bikes that you can rent. They even have Confederate trails of Gettysburg where you can ride on horseback through specified trails to get an idea of it kind of takes you off the beaten path as well to see things you might not get to see on the regular driving tour. You can hire a licensed battlefield guide. And I haven't done that, but apparently that's a very good way of doing the tour, because they will actually drive your car to the different sites, and they give you kind of more of an in-depth presentation of what happened at each of these spots. One of the things I tend to do when I go there is I just listen to the self-guiding audio CD. There's two of them that you can listen to. There's the Travel Brains one, which is narrated by Wayne Motz, who is actually he was a former Gettysburg licensed battlefield guide. He's now the CEO of the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg. His is very good. And then there's the other one, the Gettysburg Story Battlefield Auto Tour, narrated by Stephen Lang. And Stephen Lang was the actor who played George Pickett in the movie Gettysburg, and he also played Stonewall Jackson in the prequel Gods and Generals. There's hiking on designated trails and pathways, and you can also download battlefield apps to your smartphone. And for those of you that enjoy anything ghost related, there are plenty of ghost tours that you could do at night after you've done the battlefield. I personally have done the Farnsworth House ghost tour. That's a very good one. That starts up in the attic where the Confederate sharpshooters were stationed during the battle, and then they take you out onto the street and take you around town. Ghost of Gettysburg Candlelight Walking Tour was a good one as well. The one I very much enjoyed was the Ghostly Images of Gettysburg one, because they took you to a Jenny Wade house ghost tour. So you get to hear all the stories of what people had seen or heard in the house over the years. So very interesting stuff, and I hope if you're into that, I think you'll be very pleased. All right, and then here's some restaurants that I personally could recommend for you. The Blue and the Gray Grill Bar and Grill is phenomenal. They have great burgers, great wings. Dobbin House is kind of more of a classical dining, but they do have a tavern in the lower part of the building. O'Rourke's Family Eatery is a good Irish pub / restaurant. Very much enjoy the shepherd's pie from there. The Gary Owen Irish Pub is another place to go if you're into Irish cuisine. The historic Farnsworth Inn Sweeney's Tavern, that's another one that's great, because that one has memorabilia in the tavern from the Gettysburg movie. So they might have Tom Berenger's jacket. He played James Longstreet. They have so many autographed pictures and memorabilia. If you're into the movie and into memorabilia like that, you would very much enjoy that. And the Appalachian Brewing Company, that one is a relatively newer one that I had gone to a couple years ago, and it had very good food and drinks. And so this is just some of the suggested lodging that you could do. I pretty much have stayed at the Doubleday Inn in my time going to Gettysburg. It's right on the battlefield where the first day's fighting occurred, and it's just nice. You wake up, you can watch the sunrise. It's just a beautiful area if you're looking for a more relaxed visit. Some of the ones following that one, Tilly Pearson, the Gettysburg Hotel, a lot of these are in the town itself. So if you're looking for a more quiet option, Doubleday is good. But if you're looking for a regular, not a bed and breakfast, but something more like a regular hotel, they do have a Courtyard Marriott just east of town on York Street, and I believe there might be some other hotels over there. I haven't been over in that area in quite a while, but they also have a movie theater there. So if you stay at the Marriott or any of the other ones over there, you can go to a movie after a long day on the battlefield. So who will you encounter on the battlefield? You might get a group such as the ones on the left that reenacted an 1860s style debate, which was very interesting to see. You see some soldiers on the battlefield, like this one up on Little Round Top, and you'll see me. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this program, and if you have any questions, you can call Middle Country Library, ask for Jim Ward, and my extension here is 273. So if you have any questions regarding this program or just anything related to Gettysburg, I'm your man. Thanks so much. Take care.